Hi, everybody. This is going to be a longer video because I want to add a preface, and I know it takes about 8 minutes to explain the visual aids, so we'll be here for about 10 minutes. And you can break it up into chunks, or you can practice lengthening your attention span. So the preface I want to add is around process and clarifying what it looks like to do the work. If you watched last week's video, you know that I had a challenging weekend, and that weekend isn't contained in one day. The work of composting an old dream for now or in this way is painful. That particular thing had been sort of a lodestar for me. And though we have to come to grips with what's true, it's not an easy thing. There are a lot of thoughts in my head right now. The loudest stories are that I will wind up homeless, destitute, alone, and or forced into a life that I hate. And those are really scary thoughts, and they bring with them scary feelings. So I'm pointing this out because the work doesn't make those thoughts or feelings go away. In Buddhist psychology, which is just one way to think about it, the mind is a sense organ, like the eye or the ear. So the eye sees, the ear hears, and the mind thinks. It does that just because we're alive. So just like we can't prevent the ear from hearing, we can't prevent the mind from thinking, and that isn't the goal. The goal is to be able to put space between us and those thoughts, us and those feelings, us and the narrative. The reward we get from this work is that we can start to see that those thoughts are there and understand that those thoughts carry feeling tones with them and that all of that is pretty uncomfortable, and we learn to expect it. So after some time, it doesn't have the same power to overtake us, except when we hit the next big limit that really looks real and we're like, okay, I can put space between me and all of this stuff, but this is really real. And then we go through the whole process over again until we learn to trust at the next level deeper. So these are the waves. And if we are committed to growth, we will always encounter the next limit. That's what growth is, breaking through. So the skill of surfing the waves is the skill of trusting that putting space between us and the thoughts, us and the story, is the most intelligent, helpful, and protective thing to do. Trusting anything takes time. So this is a matter of practice, and that practice for our purposes is called grounding. I want to be sure to say that the reward of the work is not the absence of hard thoughts or feelings. It's the absence of the idea that those thoughts and feelings have merit, that they are true, or that they can or should stop us from moving forward. We cannot wait until there is no noise in our heads to inhabit our lives or our dreams. This is a point that can get lost because unless someone is describing the internal work they're doing, we can come to believe that there just are no waves for them, and that is false. And one of the things I so dearly want to put to rest. There are folks for whom it is easier to create space. There are folks who repress the waves or distract themselves from them. And there are folks who have less stories to contend with, but there are always waves. And the work is in learning to surf the waves, which means we can be with them without being drowned in them. At which point the waves stop looking so dangerous, serious, and scary, which I will do another video on. But this week, I want to be sure to point out that there is a lot of big scary noise in my head right now. The noise isn't absent. The work is to be here alongside that noise, walking next to it, coexisting as peacefully as possible. My energy is going towards maintaining that space rather than going towards repressing, suppressing, or indulging those thoughts and feelings. So this practice allows the space between me and the narrative to continue to grow. I'm practicing disregarding the story and thus having the real world chance to understand that when I do that, my world doesn't crumble. In fact, on the contrary, it gets bigger, brighter, and freer. So the reward of the work is that we get to be more at ease, even though there are waves, not that there are no more waves. Okay, time for visual aids. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen with you. Great. So this is what surfing the waves would look like if I drew it out, which I did. So this line right here is what the waves look like in a very normal life. And this horizontal line is peace. So grounding is anything that brings us back toward that line of peace. So as I explained before, the waves of life are normal. There is some collective idea that if we are doing it right, that we will hit a plateau and then we get to walk that plateau forever, like feeling groovy. And I want to contend that this sets us up for a lot of distress, as I pointed out in the preface. The future is sometimes probable, but never predictable. And it's way less probable now than it ever has been before in our lifetimes. So when we expect the waves to be there, they have less ability to catch us off guard. When we know the waves are normal, we can enjoy the highs without clinging to them because we won't have the story in our minds that when the high point declines, it's declining because we did something wrong or it means something about us. And when we know the waves are normal, we don't get so caught in the lows because we don't have the story of like, oh, of course, this is my lot in life. This is what I deserve. I always knew I wasn't the kind of person who ... and so on. So grounding is anything that disengages us from the story of this is what I deserve, either at the peak or in the valley. So I know it might sound a little counterintuitive to come down from the peak, but I will explain a little bit more about that in the next slide. And the video I do next week will explain what the peak is good for, what we can do with it while it's around, but the peak is not the point. We are so much more capable, intelligent, sharp, and aware at the line of peace. Peace is the height of performance and the height of good decision-making. It is the point at which we are the most steady and the most balanced. So I'm doing a lot of work right now to convey the feeling of grounding because no one can tell you how to ground. There are tons of options out there and everyone will claim that they have the magic formula. It's definitely good to go out and explore, but don't take someone else's truth as your truth. What sticks will come up from inside you. Grounding is not a matter of willpower. It's a matter of soothing ourselves. And when it clicks for you, most of the time you will want to do it. It will still be a matter of getting ourselves there when we're really activated, but it won't be following someone else's recipe. It will be unique to you. So what soothes you? What gives you space from the stories in your head? What brings you back down to baseline? What makes you feel more expanded? This is what we are talking about when we're talking about grounding. The other thing I want to say is that grounding, peace, space, this is a commitment in every moment. It's not one and done. There isn't one giant light switch. There are tons of tiny light switches with tons of tiny light bulbs. And the commitment is an understanding that when we are in the dark, it's just because we haven't found that particular switch yet. When we are committed to the everyday work of the millions of light switches, of course, there will be more light and it will get easier and easier over time. But the commitment is a recommitment in each moment to the practice of grounding. And it will be nonlinear because some days it will be easier than others. Some days we will scream or cry into the darkness because we won't have the energy to find the next switch. But the more we practice, like anything else, the more skilled we will become. The easier it will be to recognize the switches from further and further away and know what we have to do to get there. It does get easier over time to remain committed to the work because the room gets brighter and brighter and things start to make more and more sense. Okay, let's switch diagrams. Okay, so this quadrant is another way to explain grounding. And what we're going to do is talk about it in terms of stress and mood. So the vertical axis is mood from high to low, and the horizontal axis is stress from low to high. And stress here is defined as excitatory hormones, because I don't just mean negative stress. I don't just mean stress in a negative way. And I'm going to go on to explain that. So here we have the four quadrants are low stress, high mood, low stress, low mood, high stress, low mood, and high stress, high mood. So I want to start here with high stress, low mood. This is a very active, stressy state. So this looks like actively trying to get away from any kind of stress, right? Any kind of uncomfortable emotion or discomfort. So this looks like looping on fixing, looping on figuring it out, actively trying to escape something. This is a very active state, as opposed to low stress, low mood, which is apathy, burnout, defeat, learned helplessness, things like that. High stress, high mood is pretty much the opposite of high stress, low mood. We love this place. This is the honeymoon phase of anything, a new relationship, a new job. This is the feeling we get when we complete a challenge or something that we weren't sure we could do in the beginning, right? We really like it here. And we have a lot of stories around this place that when we hit this place, this is the peak, that we've sort of made it, that we figured it out. And we think we are on that like magic plateau that doesn't really exist. So what happens is we believe that this is sort of the place that we are supposed to get to, right? Like the top of the ladder. However, the chemicals in our mind, it's all about balance. We cannot stay at any high stress state over time. It is damaging to our minds to be at a high stress state like that. It's unsustainable, right? This is why drugs that artificially keep us at this high stress state really mess us up. We get neurons, it starts to downregulate, it causes a lot of damage. So if we have this idea in our minds that this high stress, high mood place is like where things are supposed to be all the time, of course, when we have to come back down to low stress, we're going to be in this low stress, low mood place because of the story around the idea of the high stress, high mood place, right? And from high stress, low mood, if we're trying to fix something, figure it out, or escape it, and we can't do that, we move into low stress, low mood because we feel defeated. So these three categories have a lot of story around them. They have a lot of this is what I deserve, right? Like, I can figure this out. I can figure this out. I'm going to get out of this, right? High stress, high mood is like, I finally did it. I made it. I figured it out. And low stress, low mood is, I'm never going to figure it out. I'm never going to whatever, ... I'm not the kind of person who, right? Low stress, high mood is the absence of story. We don't need the artificial high stress to keep us moving because we have this space from all of these ideas about who we are and what we deserve and what our future looks like. So this is a very steady, easeful place to be. So this is the work of where grounding gets us. The effective grounding is low stress, high mood, because we have a lot of space around us, right? This is the work of surfing the waves. And so again, I can't talk about technique here because what I want to convey is the feeling around grounding so that you yourself can understand which techniques you're already using that might make you feel grounded. Okay. Great. So hopefully this has been helpful. I think visual aids can add a little bit of digestibility to some of these more abstract concepts. And especially if I'm not giving you like the satisfaction of techniques, I want to go really deep into what these things feel like. Okay. So may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be peaceful and well. And I will see you next week.